Why, hello there. I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch Want, and thanks for logging on. Once again, we have survived the week that was, and this is the week in watches. I'm here with Josh Thanos of Watch Want Golfberg.
Hey.
Lead watch buyer. He will buy your watch 24/7. But before we talk about buying watches, why don't we talk about owning watches? Wrist shots. Josh, you got something new for us today.
Yeah, I picked up something when I was in Florida. Let's see if we can get a little wrist shot there. We got it? All right, cool. So it's the Mont Blanc Summit. It's 46 millimeters. This one is it's stainless steel PVD, and it comes on this cool, like, rubber NATO-ish strap that you can only get if you buy it on their website. Honestly, did not know it even existed until this weekend.
Well, I see you've scaled the summit already of smartwatches. How do you like it?
You know what? At first, I hated the watch. In fact, I was going to return it, and then I wore it for a whole day, and I started to like it, and then I wore it for another whole day, and I started to love it. And now, like, I've been wearing it all week.
So does it count your steps?
It will, yeah. It'll count my steps. It's an Android Wear, so I guess it's not super compatible with my iPhone, but there's an app. It tells me when my Uber's here, so that's cool.
Well, there you go. Does it have music?
It does not have music, though I can control my like my iTunes while I'm listening to it with this. So there's just halfway, sort of, kind of.
Is it water resistant?
I haven't tested it yet, and I haven't looked it up, so I have no clue.
To be determined.
It
doesn't have music, but he may be able to sing in the rain.
I'll tell you this real quick. My only like downside of it now is that it has this really cool crown. I don't know if you can get it. Can you get a close shot of that crown? Sort of. Yeah. I don't know. I'm bad at this. So it has this cool crown that looks like a Maurice Lacroix, or sorry, a Mont Blanc crown. But the crown doesn't do anything except you can only push it. That's it. You can't turn it. So the next one, hopefully they have it so like it has some functionality with turning the crown, because I think that would be really cool. And it's like, it's pretty cheap too.
Yeah, I mean, what'd you pay? $400 pre-owned?
Yeah, I paid $400 pre-owned. It's $930 retail. So
well bought.
Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah. And you guys will have a chance to buy it when it appears on eBay later this month.
That's right.
All right, guys. So tonight, Matt Foster, our first guy, Matt Foster, welcome. You were the first in the chat box, first and favorite for this episode only. All right, so tonight I'm going to do an off-the-wrist shot because we've got this glorious new macro camera, and this is my well-known, frequently seen, and frequently worn, as you'll cool, Duomet chronograph. The reason I'm bringing it to you, a watch you've seen often, is because this is the first show with the macro camera and the Duomet together. Wow. And as you can see, this is the kind of watch that looks almost more interesting on its case back. 2 mainspring barrels, 2 power sources, 1 escapement, 1 watch, 2 brains.
Not too thick.
Well, exactly, Mr. Jorn, with respect. But it's been running for a month and it's gained 11 seconds, so hurrah for excessively thick chronometers.
Cool, man.
All right, guys, so remember, Josh also buys watches. He owns them, he sells them, and he buys them. Watch One is always going to be there when you're ready to sell your watch. We pay cash, we pay fast, and no one does it better. We also offer many trade options, and of course, Josh answers his phone 24 hours a day.
Almost, that's right.
Close.
Got tested on that last night.
This thing can monitor all the sleep he misses, so don't worry.
That's right.
All right, guys. So Halloween is approaching, and with it come this year's batch of horror flicks. And every year there's a new group. A little bit surprising this year to see that It launched so far ahead of the holiday, but there's plenty to come, including the re-release of a golden oldie. Little Shop of Horrors is coming back into theaters. The 1986 Frank Oz directed horror musical hybrid, which actually came from a Broadway play, itself the product of a B-movie adaptation. But here's the thing, if you're watching this from Bhutan, I can't stress enough that if you're used to getting American pop culture 30 years after the fact, or 30 years later, first and foremost, spoiler alert, you're double landlocked, I get it. The bottom line is Little Shop of Horrors is the American musical film about a giant extraterrestrial and man-eating plant that manipulates Rick Moranis with the promise of fame and success. And you know who Rick Moranis is because about 3 years ago you got Ghostbusters, that guy. Okay, so here's the thing. In the re-release, though, Josh,
yes.
Now this is the change from our childhood and undoubtedly prevented us from countless nightmares when we saw Iteration 1. In this re-release, they have the original ending restored, and Audrey 2's world domination sets in as the plant wins, overruns the planet, and eats everyone.
That's right.
So in honor of Audrey 2 finally conquering the world and eating Seymour, Monster Machines, made from macabre masquerades. So tonight, This or That Monster Watches Edition. Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Survivor Limited Edition, guys. It was $48,600 when it debuted in 2008, about $30,000 today pre-owned. 42 millimeters by 15.5 thick. It's blackened titanium, and it's defined by its monstrous appearance. Trust me, it's not that big. It looks big. It's actually pretty compact. I can wear it. Monstrous appearance, though, and loaded with weapons imagery. I see muzzle brakes, a black mass of cooling grills, belted ammo, and grenade pins. This is about as silly as it got during the heights of the Royal Oak Offshore limited edition frenzy of the 2000s. And it was just before the fall, the year that Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns collapsed and everything went all to hell. Of course, in-house caliber, 3126 with the 3840 Dubois de Praz vertical clutch module, 60-hour power reserve, 100-meter depth for you apocalyptic survivors who might have to take the plunge, and of course, ideal for costumed carnage as Lord Humongous from Mad Max, the Road Warrior. The alternative, Josh.
Okay.
The Blancpain 50 Fathoms X Fathoms reference 5018. Okay, this one came out in 2011. 40,700 retail, still available, about 30,000 pre-owned, and there are a few out there. Okay, 2011 release of a 55.6 millimeter diameter watch. It's 24 millimeters thick, guys, and it's defined by a titanium case, a sapphire bezel, a rubber gauntlet strap. It's not really a strap, it's like a gauntlet, like Wonder Woman style in rubber. A monstrous diver, characterized by its size rather than its appearance. Yes, it looks crazy, but it's even bigger than it looks, unlike the AP. It's as big as it looks. Caliber 99, 18B, 5-day power reserve, automatic winding with a 5-minute countdown chronograph for decompressions, and a depth gauge that shows you both your current depth and your maximum depth. Josh, this one can go down to 300 meters max. No need to be afraid of the dark this Halloween. This one's got loom shots like none other.
Glows like crazy.
A watch big enough for Cthulhu to strap one onto each tentacle. So Josh, the gauntlet is thrown. Which monster do you choose?
All right, so as you know, I'm a fan of AP. Right, so normally I would say let's go for the AP, but the Survivor, in my opinion, is one of the worst special editions. Right up next to like the T3. I'm sorry, I don't like. I was
gonna have the T3 on the show.
Oh god, yeah, it's something about it. I can't. By the way, you say it's wearable. I disagree wholeheartedly. It's a 42 millimeter that wears like a 48 in my opinion. It's got these big crazy. I mean, it's funky. But it feels like almost gimmicky though. I mean, listen. I know there was a lot of hard work that was put into the watch. It's probably the most unique special edition, right?
That's for,
Nothing else looks anything like that. So from that standpoint, it's cool. It's definitely cool, but it's kind of like a love-hate for me, right?
And it looks like a Cyclops.
It does. It's just not for me. The Blancpain 50 Fathoms, though, on the other hand, is a watch that's almost unwearable, but I'd love to wear it, right? It's huge. I think we saw one in a window in Switzerland.
We did. It was the size of an actual submersible craft. You could dive inside this down to the Titanic.
We did. It was amazing. It was great. We'll have video of that. But but from the loom standpoint and the functionality standpoint, I mean, it's a true functional diver. Right? I mean, would you agree?
It's about as literal a tool watch as you can get. This is all sorts of equipment that you don't expect in a Rolex, even a Sea Dweller. This is, quite frankly, a watch that is too big to wear, but so enticing you want to try.
Right. So you have a true tool watch and a watch worn by somebody who may be considered a tool. And I'm just kidding. I'd have to pick the Blancpain just because the loom is amazing. It's truly functional, and I feel like Blancpain doesn't get enough credit where they should be getting more credit.
I would agree. Of the two, it's the more special watch. It's the watch that I would describe as, frankly, the most unique diving watch in the world.
They're both limited or no?
The Blancpain is limited by practicality and reason, and vetoes from wives and girlfriends. But the AP was limited to 1,000. I'll be honest. I don't know if this is just a quirk of quantum physics or what, guys, but for some reason the watch wears well on my little wrist and Josh doesn't like the way it fits. So I'm going to go with the AP. I think this was the high watermark before the fall. This was, this was literally the Escalade Platinum for the wrist during the era of irrational exuberance, to use the immortal phrase from Alan Greenspan. This is the economy before the debt crisis, before the housing crash, before 2008. And it's all of that inside a black DLC titanium case. So I would go with that one.
Though, just take what I say with a grain of salt because I'm wearing this. So.
And right now I'm wearing nothing, so there.
There you go.
Okay, so guys, because I know you don't spend enough time looking at watches online right now. This is a problem. You have it, I understand. We have a support group now because I'm finally doing the Instagram thing online.
Right. I follow you.
Josh follows, and Josh is cooler than me. Therefore, you should follow me, because Josh is cooler than me, and he follows me. Get it?
Right.
Okay, so now we know who's on first. I'm actually taking control of my Instagram account, guys, from my corporate minders. Sue, you've done a great job, but frankly, it's got to have a Tim Mosso slant on it, because it's got Tim Mosso's name on it, and not that like kid who's a pitcher, the real Tim Mosso.
Oh,
so follow Tim_Mosso on Instagram, and you can see my latest posts. Granted, it's going to be a little JLC heavy, but we got some AP Pride of Argentina coming up tonight to start your weekend off right with a little bit of Halloween candy thrown in. So follow me on Instagram and see my world through my own eyes as it happens. It's a horrifying vision. Okay, guys, I want to give a shout out to our friends and fans joining us, Mr. Mutton Hollow, Thumper JDM, Jumbo Jet Pilot, Josh Thanos. How are you in the chat box and here at the same time?
I've cloned myself.
Quantum physics strikes again, twice in one episode, guys. All right, Daniel HSC, I see Giants fan, Alan Schuster, and of course Adam Brown, longtime friend from Salesforce. Thin Lizzy fly today. I'm a big fan of Thin Lizzy, guys. Okay, welcome Giants fan, Val Blitz, Anton, David Cahill. Guys, thanks for joining us from around the globe. New watches, naturally. The weekend watches, we're bringing you our selections. Too much to cover, but here's an interesting one. Gallet Heritage Edition Racing Chronograph. All right, Gallet, interesting old name, pretty much continuously in operation with some small stutters, but they're not a revived brand. There's integrity to the brand, and there's integrity to the watch. And 40 millimeters in stainless steel, for me, this feels like a throwback to the late 90s, early 2000s, and Girard-Perregaux' last and greatest Ferrari chronographs. It looks it, it feels it, and it sized it. So for me, 40 millimeters stainless steel black gator strap with it's actually a hornback strap, AP style, with a contrasting red stitch, impressive dial detail, a nice sporting tritone of black, white, and red accents, and a sharp caliber 550 based on a Vaucher, I believe the VMF 3022/11 twin barrel, 50-hour reserve, free sprung, nice modern architecture with a vertical clutch and a column wheel, and a solid power reserve of 50 hours via those twin barrels, and a 100-meter diving depth or water resistance test so you can get this one wet. 500 pieces, Josh, 12,500. You can buy some serious Rolex metal from the Daytona family, and of course, non-metallic gray side of the moon for that same coin.
Right.
Is this a compelling alternative, or are they overreaching?
I guess it depends on what you're looking for out of one of these watches, right? If you're looking for something off the beaten path and something that you won't see anyone else wearing, then yeah, I'd say it's a great alternative. If you're looking for something that is going to be super hot and it's going to go up in value and or hold value, then go for the Rolex. And if you're looking for something super cool and something that you can get at a very competitive price pre-owned, then go for the Omega.
Yeah, if you're the type who buys a watch, first based on the substance, if you're the kind who says, you know, I'm going to buy a watch that's objectively a good piece, it's well made, the innards are well crafted from a reputable movement manufacturer, and the dial's nicely detailed and well executed, I think this is a watch that's compelling. If you're the type to buy a European vacation, 3 weeks, blow $20,000, the highest hotels, the oldest champagnes, the best restaurants with the maximum Michelin star rating, and you're into the memories, you're not going to ask what's the residual value of that. If you're that kind of guy and you spend like that for good times, this is definitely your watch, because substantively, stylistically, it's a great piece, and it's bold of them to release it in 40 millimeters, continuing I think the step back from the excesses of the 2000s in sizes. So this is a great piece. I do think it's priced against some stiff competition, but it's going to go to the guy who knows what he likes and can afford it, and can afford to lose a lot of value, frankly, on resale. But if you want a sports watch from a more established high horology name, that's perhaps a bit of a discount on a recent favorite. Girard-Perregaux Laureato 42 millimeters black ceramic. Guys, this is a great alternative to AP's black ceramic at less than a fifth of the price. 42 millimeters full black ceramic case, bezel, bracelet, and clasp, not including the inner swing arms. Those are metal. Slick dial with clou de Paris texture, really rich, nicely done, as only a high horology brand with the money to spend on nice components can. And also an in-house caliber 1800 automatic winder chronograph, date, 54-hour power reserve executed by GP with Edicron, so you know it's accurate. And finally, 100-meter water resistance means it's rugged, and a 10.9mm thickness means it's versatile. You can wear it with anything. This might be an all-the-time watch if you can get over the stark blackness of it. A compelling sports watch considering the pricing. A certain Audemars Piguet retails for about $94,000. You may recognize it. That certain Audemars Piguet, one of the hottest watches of last year. The GP might offer 90% of the look for less than a fifth of the price at $16,700, which is only a $2,400 premium over the Laureato in steel.
Right.
Is this a great buy, or is it an overambitious reach by GP?
Well, we talked about GP in the past, and I'm a fan of the brand. I think it's underrated, and I think what happens is because of that, you get a value play when you go, say, pre-owned or gray market. I'll say, is this limited at all?
I don't believe this is a limited piece. I believe it's going to be limited to the number they can sell.
Okay, cool. So the only issue that I really find with a full ceramic bracelet is something that we've seen in the Panerai Tutanero, the 438, is that while it won't scratch for the most part, it will be brittle, and if you do make a mistake and hit a table a little bit too hard or hit a doorknob or something, you can crack that bracelet, crack the case, and now, I mean, you're talking about total loss, right?
Yes.
So that would be the only real issue. If it's an everyday wear, you have to be someone who wears your watches extremely careful. While I would, if I had the money, I'd probably go for it. What was the, you said 16.7 was the price?
Yeah, 16.7 is the list.
I mean, it doesn't feel overly expensive for the watch, and I feel like you could probably get it pre-owned probably somewhere around 10 or so, you would assume. So at that price, it feels like it's a value. But yeah, I just say if you're careful with your watch and you want something that's a little bit off the beaten path, it's going to have the same finishing and really respectability from a good brand like an AP would for a much lower price point. I'd say it makes sense. And the watch, the Laureato fits great. I mean, we talk about this.
We really like the steel version of the watch.
Love
so this is a nice evolution. It's for the gentleman of leisure, the guy who perhaps is going to wear his watch and occasionally worry about a scratch, a scuff. The perfectionist, not hard on his stuff, who worries more about the superficial damage, not the guy who's going to beat a watch. If you're looking for an everyday beater, the same watch for $2,400 less, that's your steel Laureato 42. We have an interesting question from McLaren 855. Tim, what exactly is classified as a sports watch? There are so many sports watches people portray as sports timepieces these days. So what is a sports watch? I think it's a combination of two things. There are the capabilities. In general, if you're looking at a watch that has a tachymetric scale and a chronograph, even if it's an old world style, think the Mont Blanc 1858 tachymeter, that's a sports watch. That's a land-bound, ground-bound sports watch. It's not for flying, it's not for diving, but they're the complication and the function define it as a sports watch, along with the size. And then there's the highly water-resistant watch. You know, when you see 100 meters, it's not a pure dress watch. I would say, other than that, there are going to be a lot of borderline cases that are defined by how people wear the watch and how the brand markets the watch. So, for instance, I don't think the new steel Vacheron triple calendar is a sports watch. I do think, despite having 3 ATM water resistance, the Key to Lille in steel is a sports watch. That's a sports-styled watch.
There's a question. So, how about this watch? This is one that's like kind of a tweener, right? Obviously, it's white gold, so you wouldn't assume it's a sport watch, but it's not a dress watch, right? You wouldn't consider that a dress watch.
I would say because when it debuted in the same case size with the same movement and the same layout as a yellow gold watch with an eggshell dial, it was definitely a dress watch when it came out. It's designed as a wristwatch version of a gold pocket watch, which to me feels pretty formal. I will say this is the sportiest version of a dress watch. This is the sportiest version of the Dual Met.
Yeah, with the black dial.
Chronograph,
Right, exactly. But I mean, there's so much going on the dial as it is. You think a lot of people, from a retail perspective, when they're thinking about a dress watch, they want something as simple as possible. In fact, I have a lot of customers who are talking to me, asking me about dress watches. They want not even a sub-second style. They want literally just time. So, I mean, that's traditionally, I would say, would be a dress watch. And then anything that moves away from that is slowly getting towards sport, right?
I think anything that emulates a Seamaster, a Super Ocean, or a Submariner, that's a sports watch. If it has a rotating bezel, that's a sports watch. Pilots, drivers, divers watch, that's a sports watch. Technicians watch, that's a sports watch. We can define this. I think maybe we'll have like a rap battle about dress and sports watches someday and try to define that line. But today, our freestyle rhymes must move on because we're getting a little bit behind the 8 ball and behind the power curve, to use a pilot's term. Guys, all right, Swiss watch export updates for September. Data is relative to 2016, so keep in mind the baseline is weak, pathetic, and represents something of a worst-case scenario. That said, the recovery continues, and this is a recovery that started in February, so it's now a durable trend. Precious metals lead steel in value gained, so they are the leading gainers. They are the headliners, and if you combine two-tone and you combine precious metals, they are collectively far more than the value of straight steel. I'll also say that the trend continues from February, but here's how you know it's for real. Hong Kong and Singapore have supplanted the still growing mainland Chinese market, and that means that these historic watch hubs for general watch buyer tourism, major collectors, and the world-leading East Asian Swiss watch luxury market, these are your bellwethers, Hong Kong and Singapore. And Singapore is up with an outrageous 89.6% gain in Swiss watch value imported. And this is specifically, the FH calls out, the FH is the federation for the Swiss watch industry. This is specifically due to the high value of the units being exported to Singapore. It's not being done with numbers of watches. It's not being done with discounting. The unit value is very high right now. And if you combine Hong Kong with its market share, and Hong Kong's up 13.7 for the month, but if you combine Singapore and Hong Kong together, they represent 22.2% of all Swiss luxury watch exports. And of course, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the USA remain the top three markets, each one with over 10% of the global export value individually. But here's the thing, luxury leads the charge, guys. The Swiss swoon was caused by a downturn in the high-end segment, not your Swatch watches, not your fossils. And this segment is also leading the recovery. Watches priced over Swiss franc 3,000 are leading the charge, and it's by a huge margin. You can see that column, and you can see how much the value has gained relative to other price ranges. You can also see that volume is actually down a little bit. So the number of watches is a bit lower, but the value is much, much higher. And this is a good thing for a few reasons. It means that fewer watches are being produced, but more value exported, so higher transaction prices, fewer discounts, and better inventory calculations and management by the manufacturers themselves. Guys, this is what a luxury recovery looks like. Sub 200 Swiss franc watches are getting absolutely hammered. Those are your fossils. Those aren't sub $100 Swatch watches. Those are your fossils. Those are your Nixon type watches that are getting hammered because the Apple Watch is killing the Swiss quartz fashion watch. I predicted 3 years ago on the completely unseen, never read, and never unearthed Watch You Want blog that this would be the outcome, and I was right. I get to celebrate, even though no one will ever know because no one read that article, and I think I put OJ's name on it, so you don't even know it was me.
There you go.
Not happy right now. Fossil.
So they're going over they're taking over like Michael Kors and stuff like that?
I would say that market is being cannibalized by smartwatches. But the good news is we've now seen the proof. Cheap watches, yeah, they're going to get slaughtered. If you're like a stockholder in that kind of company, look elsewhere, maybe Tesla. But the bottom line is right now the Swiss watch luxury segment is doing great, and we're happy to see it. Yeah. All right, so new watches continued, Josh. And I gotta say that another one from a much smaller high horology brand caught my eye. Beautiful colors, superb execution, and a brand I love, Laurent Ferrier Gallet porcelain.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this is the thing about this specific model. 10 pieces defined by an epic porcelain dial. A little bit of shades of the Longomatic anniversary here, but this epic porcelain dial features a unique combination of a clear enamel over a ceramic disc. So a lot of the fabrication process, including the firing and the painting, is similar to enamel, but it's a little bit more fragile because instead of a gold base, which you would use for enamel, you're using a ceramic base, which gives it that rich white color. And the timepiece, I would say, guys, ceramic best known in the West from Dresden dolls and Dresden porcelain figurines. That's where you'll traditionally see this. And more recently in horology, featured on Crador's H series, the H1 and the H2. Beautiful porcelain dials on those. Still rarely seen in horology. 10 pieces, 64,000 US in white gold. Seems like a pretty good deal from an independent manufacturer. It's not just about the dial. The 41 by 41 millimeter case has a spectacular caliber FBN 22901 automatic micro rotor, 3-day power reserve, double direct impulse escapement in silicon, beautifully finished. I'm actually amazed. It also has a Besançon French Observatory chronometer certificate. Josh, who buys this watch? Who's the customer for this kind of thing?
Well, it's going to be the guys who are already focused on this brand. I mean, Laurent Ferrier has been slowly gaining a little bit of notoriety, but you know they don't do a lot of marketing and whatnot. So it's guys who have been collecting the Audemars, the Pateks, the Rolexes for a long time, and now are moving on to a brand where they can have contact with the owner. You know, Laurent himself, right?
Yes.
So and people who have like people who want dress watches too, because these are all dress watches. Doesn't make anything that's really a sport watch. But as well as people who can afford these watches, because I don't think you're really getting discounts on them either. They're making them such small numbers that you're getting super high-end watches, highly finished, complicated movements, but not complicated dials. It's a very narrow market, but the guys are out there. They're fanatics.
Absolutely. If you want to have contact with Laurent Ferrier and Christian, his son, who run the company,
right.
The name on the dial is the name on the door, is the name at the desk. So
right.
This is a very personal experience, and even though this isn't a bespoke or custom model,
right.
with 10 pieces made, it's going to be a one-to-one basis, the purchase experience, and I think that level of, it goes beyond the boutique white glove. I think that level of relating to the manufacturer is what people are looking for, is more and more people who used to buy the high-end Holy Trinity watch, the Audemars, the Patek, the Vacheron, now they're looking at those, but they're also looking at these independents because it's more personal.
It's like buying a Shelby from him.
Exactly.
Right.
Or a Pete Brock Cobra.
There you go.
I would also say this, question from Tan Yang Zhu, question about what I think about JLC vintage triple dates. I would say remember that Philippe Dufour owns one. If you're talking about those watches, like I want to say the 2721 reference, the 2723, your calibers, 464, like 494, 484, great watches. Again, I can't think of a greater seal of approval than Philippe Dufour buying one for himself. So again, I'll have a show on how to buy vintage. You have to protect yourself, but that's a great and undervalued and underappreciated watch and an underappreciated model family. So speaking of the bespoke experience and the small manufacturer, we go from Switzerland to Germany. And Moritz Grossmann, a company we love, founded by Christine Hutter, who is a former watchmaker for Lange, and Jens Schneider, who is kind of lead technical development. You'll know them if you buy one of their watches, and you'll get a chance to go see it being made. Two interesting new watches from them. One I like, one has me scratching my head. But first, the one I love, and the Bennu Enamel is a special timepiece, guys. 41 millimeters, manual wind, immaculately finished, true enamel dial with a beautiful combination of golden assegai-style hands and blue numerals. There are actually two dial variants you can pick from. Special at only 18 pieces made, and for $26,000 US, very compelling. A good buy, a genuine value, and a rarity in this segment. The one that has me scratching my head, or maybe I should say scratching my skull, is the Atom Pure Skull. Named after an Egyptian god, not necessarily the god of death, but it may as well be. 41 millimeters, manual wind, 10 pieces each in polished steel and blackened steel, $14,580 US. So the price is right. There's nothing abusive about the price, but I do feel like it's awesome from a craft standpoint, but the skull is jarringly wrong for the brand. Even though portable skull watches have existed since the Renaissance, and the Southern Renaissance, not just the Northern. Like the very beginning, skull watches, that's a gorgeous piece from the Patek Museum, by the way. You can see it over in Geneva. They've been around forever, but skull watches for everyone is a trend that must end. I'm saying it right here. From certain brands, it's as jarringly uncomfortable as Angela Lansbury breaking out a freestyle rhyme and a breakdance. Murder, she wrote, not rhymes, guys. Remember that. Some things just don't go together, like orange juice and mint gum. So,
I don't know, I think it's cool.
Trent, you think it's cool? Good. This is disagreement. This is the tension you can only get on Fox until now.
Screw you, Tim. I quit. No, I'm just kidding. There's thank you. Appreciate that. There's only 10 each, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's fine. If this was mass produced, then I'd say yeah, it's a big mistake.
Yeah, there's only 10 of this, and then you add the Coram Bubbles, and then you add the Fiona Kruger, and then you add the Richard Milles, and
you're just naming all watches that are super cool that I love.
Okay, they're not bad skull watches. I'm just saying this doesn't feel right. Angela Lansbury again, guys.
Well, it's a manufacturer that, like you said, it's similar. Their watches have a similar look to Lange. So imagine if Lange came out with a watch like this, people would be like up in arms. So they're a small enough manufacturer to kind of get away with like weird stuff like this.
The weirdest Angela Lansbury ever did was as the mother in The Manchurian Candidate. That was creepy, but that was also like 60 years ago.
Yeah.
She don't play that role anymore.
Right.
Big hair, heavy frames, old lady, that's Moritz Grossmann. I don't want to see them doing skull watches. I'm willing to be controversial here.
Stay in your lane. That's the message.
Exactly. But look, we don't agree on everything.
Fair
no
enough.
robots here. All right.
From a business standpoint, it probably makes sense.
We aren't Quartz hosts, guys. All right. So another trend that must end, coincident with the best article published in the watch world this week. Okay, SJX, Watches by SJX is his website. Super cool connoisseur, journalist, and expert in the segment. He had an interview with Oral Bax, formerly of Christie's, now of Phillips. Absolutely smoking style. This is a guy I love to read, interviewing a guy I love to watch. But here's the thing. The last question of the interview soured me just a little bit, just a bit. A softball question and an abusive answer. Okay, so SJX, because of the growing popularity of, by the way, read the article because it's worthwhile. Because of the growing popularity of vintage watches, we've seen the prices at auction houses escalate. Has it become a bubble, Oral? Okay, the answer? Well, what you'll then realize is that over the last 35 years, vintage watches have not outperformed other areas of collecting. If they haven't outperformed, what does that mean? That watches have relatively underperformed. Okay, reality check here. 35 years ago, there was basically no vintage watch market.
That's right.
Okay, let's remember that back when Ronald Reagan heroically brainstormed with Superman to liberate Grenada, and this actually happened, guys, there was no serious interest in vintage wristwatches outside of low-level, nascent interest in Italy, Japan, and a little bit Germany. To the extent that there was any vintage market, it was, again, a still young and emerging interest in pocket watches. No one who was a serious connoisseur with money to spend at an auction, much less the kind of person who knew that there was even watch auctions going on back then before the internet, no one who ran with that crowd was looking for a wristwatch. Patek Philippe pocket watches were arguably the very beginning of the vintage watch market and the vintage watch community in the early 80s. It's important to remember that this was across the board. In the late 70s, during the height of the quartz crisis, IWC seriously considered scaling down to just become a niche manufacturer of mechanical pocket watches for connoisseurs, and this almost happened to the point where they continued to make connoisseur watches like this weird hybrid Ingenieur 5215 pocket watch. It's a shock-resistant, anti-magnetic, water-resistant Ingenieur pocket watch. This was still happening as late as the early 90s, guys, and Patek Philippe celebrated its 150th anniversary in style in 1989 with the monumental Caliber 89, because that was a response to the strongest undercurrents of collector interest in 1989. Now, the vintage wristwatch as a Ferrari phenomenon, and I will say as a Enzo-era Ferrari based on the prices, is definitely a product of the last 10 to 15 years. Consider these statistics. In the last 24 months, the highest price paid for a wristwatch, so the highest price paid for a wristwatch has been reset twice in the last 24 months. Both times by Patek Philippe. 5016 for only watch, and then a 1518 in November of last year. In the last 24 months, the highest price paid for a Rolex has been reset twice. And Rolex is almost all wristwatches, so you know what that means. Care to bet that that record will survive this guy when Oral Bax drops the hammer later this month? I doubt it. I'm just saying, this is what a bubble looks like. Rapid acceleration from nothing. Claiming that watches are an underperforming asset over the last 35 years is like claiming that Tesla stock, IPO 2010, $17 a share, by the way, guys, is an underperforming asset over the last 3 decades and change. By the way, 345.10 at close today. So yeah, I suppose you could say spread over 30, by the way. Full disclosure, journalistic integrity, of which I normally have none. Tesla stockholder right here.
That's right.
And future owner. Probably both of us, actually.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, if you take something that is a recent trend and extrapolate it over a completely unrealistic time frame, you can flatten that trend line. And I think Aurelbach's, he's a smart guy. He's a guy I love to read. He's a guy I love to watch. He's probably the only person I've ever seen or experienced who can talk as much BS about watches and entertain for the same length of time as I can. I identify with that dude. He's the Jedi version of me, the Padawan. But the bottom line is he knows which side his bread is buttered and he's protecting it. By all means, follow him later this month at the Philips auction. It's going to be pyrotechnic. Just don't expect to get a good deal. All right, guys. I want to give a quick shout out to all of our friends joining us tonight and maybe answer a couple of your live questions. Okay, Thin Lizzy Fly today, Josh, Rolex Yachtmaster 2 or Daytona Ceramic? I'm going to assume all else equal, both steel.
Yeah.
Which do you go for? Probably one available pre-owned, one only available new or pre-owned at a premium.
Oh, right now you can pick up if you're looking for both of these watches pre-owned, you're going to be paying less for the Yachtmaster 2 than you would for the Daytona, which, you know, you're essentially going to be paying the retail for Yachtmaster 2 for the Daytona and then the retail for the Daytona for the Yachtmaster 2. But I don't know, I'd say that depends on size, two completely different watches. If you have a wrist that can handle a 44mm Rolex, then go for the Yachtmaster 2, and you want to spend a few less bucks on a pre-owned watch, go that way. If you want to have the watch that everyone's chasing right now and you want a watch that's a little bit smaller and a little bit more wearable at a 40mm that wears really like a 41, I'd say go for the Daytona. And black dial Daytona, black bezel. I stand on that one.
Okay, well there you go. That's the opinion from the expert who sees these things all day long, and I'll be totally honest, they're such different watches that you really have to try both of them on, because the 44 Yachtmaster 2 is a big bulky thing, and the Daytona, which hasn't moved up to a super case yet, is still downright svelte. Physically, it's the same watch it was in 1988 when the automatic debuted, so try them both on, and I think that's probably going to give you your answer. Yeah. Just remember, if you got to go steel Daytona and you got to have the ceramic bezel, you're going to pay a premium. Yeah, we're going to wait.
And where are you going to try on a stainless steel Daytona ceramic bezel right now? I guess that's it. That's it. Yeah.
That's the answer. We've got one. Come see it. Yeah, okay. Other questions coming through tonight. How much do we think the Paul Newman will go for?
Infinity?
Okay, guys. Take your bearings here. The record for a wristwatch, I want to say, is about $10,700,000 US for the Patek Philippe 1518 that sold last November. So this would not only substantially advance the highest price ever paid for a Rolex, it would have to almost double the highest price ever paid for a Rolex. So we might see a record on a couple of different fronts here, but a lot's going to depend on how well Box works the room. I have to say, this is one of the few cases where I believe the auctioneer really will make the difference. And depending on how many of the bidders are actually physically sitting there and just supercharged by the energy of the moment, the electricity in the room, that's going to depend on whether this is a record breaker on one level, most expensive Rolex, or two, most expensive wristwatch. I'm actually going to say I don't think it will set the record for the most expensive wristwatch. I think it will be the most expensive Rolex.
Well, I'll say this, that regardless of what happens, I think it will affect the overall market, because right now Rolex has gone crazy because we've seen a lot of these really crazy auction prices. So you're seeing like old, or not old, but say like late 80s, early 90s Pepsis with full set box and papers going for like mid to high teens, which those are watches that used to sell for like 10 or less. So I think that what might happen is if you see a disappointing auction price, it could hurt the overall market. But if you see a one that's exceeded, or say like a record, then it will actually inflate the market even more than what's happening right now. That's just my guess.
Here's my personal theory, guys. I think that there was a period from 2014 to 2015 when you saw a peak of vintage watch and vintage, like, high-end auto, like Pebble Beach type stuff. Vintage Ferraris driven to victory by Sterling Moss, pre-war Lagonda and Talbot, and all sorts of vintage, Maybach Zeppelin and Duesenberg type stuff hitting its peak. The car market has come down since then. Those cars are no longer fetching the prices they were. I believe we're about to see something approaching that peak in the unsustainable growth of the vintage watch market. And I think that is upon us. And I think this year, this cycle, from this fall into next spring, over one full auction season cycle, I think we will see the peak and then the beginning of a retreat from these crazed heights. Because I just don't think these Rolex and Patek references can keep setting records. I think at some point the end users all have their watches, and then they lay off the top of the market, and you begin to see things like Vintage Hoyer and Universal Geneve and Blancpain and that type of watch, Omega, watches that are not quite the permanent blue chips. You'll start to see them come down, and I think this is going to be the defining trend of the next 18 months. Maybe I'm completely wrong, guys, but it's got to stop somewhere. This is a trend that must end.
Hopefully it's more of a settle than a drop, but I think that's probably kind of where it'll be.
I want to give a final shout out to Eddie Landsberg, the founder and proprietor of the Facebook Watch You Want group. Guys, join it. Eddie's a great guy and a long-term follower. We love what he does there. We love what he does in our chat box. Thank you for joining us tonight. The last word is going to be Josh Thanos, and this is a question from Bob Jones.
Okay.
Will the Daytona market, and I believe he's talking about the steel Zenith from the 90s and the steel ceramic of the moment, will it cool?
I think eventually it'll have to, but I don't think it'll ever. The Zeniths will cool, but still above what they used to, and the ceramics, who knows, because they're still in production, so that has to do purely with how Rolex handles their business. So hopefully that answers your question, maybe a little bit. Okay, so there you have it. The final word. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your participation in the chat. Those who got up early, those who stayed up late, double thanks. You are the backbone of our broadcast. You're the reason I have the best job in the world. I'm Tim. He's Josh. They're the amigos. She's Sue. This is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.